History isn't one-sided. Who tells it and how is everything. That's why governments and museums need to work together for real reconciliation. First off, what is reconciliation? Reconciliation is a pretty big buzzword nowadays, so for clarification, reconciliation means making things right after harm has been done. In Canada, it mostly refers to the relationship between Indigenous peoples and the government after centuries of colonization. So, what is the government doing? Well, for the main part, they address historical injustices through policies, formal apologies, financial compensation, and promoting and supporting education aimed at reconciliation. And when it comes to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, the Canadian government says they're committed to a nation-to-nation and government-to-government relationship built on respect and cooperation.
How does that help? When the government publicly apologizes for past injustices, it creates awareness, bringing the truth and the severity of the situation into the light. This is the first step towards healing. Plus, they're acting on the 94 calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So what about museums? What are they supposed to do? Museums are powerful places preserving the past, meant to be places that shape how we understand history. The problem is, most Canadian museums were built on colonial perspectives, telling one-sided stories and holding Indigenous artifacts without consent. The ideal decolonized museum is one that works with Indigenous communities, tells the full truth of stories from many different perspectives and voices, and there will be no stolen artifacts. But what's stopping all museums from completely decolonizing?
First off, funding is limited, and changing exhibits and returning artifacts takes a lot of time and resources. $500,000 went to the BC Museums Association to support the repatriation of Indigenous artifacts, but this had to support 203 nations, so it really isn't enough. Second of all, public backlash is another issue. When the Royal BC Museum began decolonizing their Old Town exhibit, they faced major criticism. People didn't want it to change, as it had been the same for so long, and the project had costed them around $789 million overall.
In situations like this, we need to call upon the government to do more. Museums are an integral part of reconciliation, and they can't decolonize alone. It's expensive, time-consuming, and often controversial. But if reconciliation is truly a priority to them, then investing in the truth has to matter too.
So what is the government currently doing to support museums? In 2015, the TRC released its 94 calls to action, 2 of them being directly about museums. In short, number 67 calls on the federal government to fund a national review of museum policies to make sure they follow the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And number 68 asks for funding for reconciliation-themed projects and commemorations. The government has started funding Indigenous-led museums and training programs for Indigenous curators. This is a start, but not the finish line. So, why do the governments and museums have to work together?
Together, they can tell the full story and return stolen artifacts, because reconciliation isn't a checklist, and because the truth means sharing every voice, and because history needs and deserves more than one point of view.
It is about what kind of future we are building together.